Hello, I'm Maiki Oreta and welcome to Trade Talks, where we sit down with industry leaders, innovators, and change makers who are shaping markets, challenging norms, and making an impact. Here we explore the strategies that drive progress, the challenges that push industries and communities forward, and the ideas reshaping the way we work and live. What's new, what matters, and what's next? Let's find out together. On this episode, we take a closer look at the conflict in Gaza, not just as a humanitarian crisis, but as an economic story. The war has reignited, with Israel launching new attacks into Gaza. It has already devastated businesses, disrupted trade, and upended livelihoods of residents there, raising questions about the economic survival and recovery of Palestinians in the enclave. As the world watches, discussions intensify over Gaza's future, the role of the Palestinian Authority, and the long-term path to stability. At the same time, the Philippines and Palestine share a long-standing diplomatic relationship. As global efforts focus on Palestine's rebuilding, an important question emerges: how can the two nations strengthen economic and trade ties to support recovery? To understand the full picture beyond politics and humanitarian concerns, we turn to someone with firsthand insight into the current challenges and future prospects of Palestinians and their pursuit to establishing their own state. Joining us is His Excellency Munir Anastas, the Ambassador of Palestine to the Philippines. Good morning, Ambassador Anastas.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
I wanted to start by first expressing my condolences. Over 429 Palestinians lost their lives overnight in an airstrike. It was a violation of the ceasefire with Hamas. What are your thoughts on this new development?
Well, unfortunately, as you mentioned, Israel violated the agreement with Hamas on the ceasefire for personal reasons and personal interest of Mr. Netanyahu. That Ben Gvir, one of the members of the coalition who was in the government of Netanyahu, he left the government after the ceasefire. And he said that he is not willing to stay in this government unless they resume the attacks. This was one reason. Second reason is that the Knesset, the Israeli Knesset, is supposed to adopt the budget. And without the support of Ben Gvir, this hardliner, Netanyahu was fearing to fail in adopting the budget. And if this was the case, which means if he fails adopting the budget, then there will be new elections. And he knows very well that he will lose these elections. So it is for his own political survival. This is the main reason behind these attacks, unfortunately. And as you mentioned, just overnight, we are talking about 429 people dead. It's civilians, mostly kids and women. Beside this, there were around 500 injured, knowing that the hospitals were already destroyed during the 15 months of the Israeli attacks since the 7th of October. Your program is relating principally to economy and to industry, but you know that politics is everywhere, and there is no economy and no industry without politics behind. So unfortunately, the political scene in the Middle East, and I'm talking principally about Palestine, which is composed of, as you know, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, both are affected by the continuous Israeli aggressions, not only in the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is very well known because of the huge genocidal war and attacks by Israel, but since the ceasefire in January 19th, they started also attacks on the West Bank. And we are talking about almost 1,000 casualties in the West Bank since that date.
And just to put things into perspective, Ambassador Anastas, this is not a religious conflict. It has deep roots in, it's very political, and it's also very territorial.
Thank you for mentioning it. It is true. There is a huge confusion, and this is the purpose of Netanyahu trying to create this confusion, presenting our conflict, the conflict between Israel and Palestine, as a religious conflict, which is not the case at all. It is a legal conflict, a political conflict, a territorial conflict. Beside this, it is important to mention something and to be aware about it and to be careful as well. Nowadays, whenever anybody criticizes Israel or the Israeli policy, he will be immediately accused as anti-Semitic. And this is what the Israeli ambassador did a few weeks ago during the commemoration of the Holocaust. He accused the Filipino people to be anti-Semitic, which is absurd. And we know that Philippines was one of the first countries to host Jews during the Second World War and to welcome them. So he was accusing Philippines of being anti-Semitic. Why? Because only political positions. There was only 1 or 2 demonstrations against the war, not against Israel, against the war, against the destruction. And there was nothing anti-Semitic, nothing religious, but immediately they accuse anybody who criticizes their policy by being anti-Semitic, unfortunately.
And another thing I wanted to put into context, because just to shape people's understanding of what's happening. When we talk about Palestine, you've got to separate it between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank on different sides. In terms of economic growth, prior to the escalation of the conflict on October 7th of 2023, GDP in Gaza, and it's separate in the West Bank, 2017 through to 2022, in Gaza it was at 0.6%. Looking into Q4 2023, that's the recent figures that we have, it contracted by 81%.
Yes.
If you take a look at the West Bank, GDP in the West Bank prior to the October 7th escalation of the conflict was at 4.6%. It's contracted by 35% as of Q1 2024. What does this tell you about where you are now and about how big the challenge is to move forward from these massive contractions?
Well, first of all, when it comes to, as you mentioned, Palestine is composed of 2 parts. One part is the Gaza Strip, the second part is the West Bank of Jordan, including East Jerusalem, that is, of course, under occupation. This is following the UN resolutions. Palestine is composed of these 2 entities. Now, as you mentioned, the growth in the Gaza Strip is slightly different from the West Bank. But the collapse of the GDP in Gaza was huge. You're talking about 80%. We can talk about 100%, actually. There is nothing left. The infrastructure in Gaza was completely disseminated completely.
Yeah, and when you look at the bigger picture, the global economy isn't really helping as well. The global economy is facing inflation, interest rates, supply chain disruptions. I mean, since the war in Ukraine, how now is the situation for economies as fragile as Palestine's?
Well, Palestine was depending on trade, and principally, for example, olive oil, dates, and stones as well. But also tourism. Tourism was one of the main
drivers of growth for the Palestinian economy.
And since the
religious tourism specifically,
principally religious tourism to Bethlehem, which is my city, actually, unfortunately, it stopped completely, and all the industry related to tourism
took a hit
as well. It collapsed. So, how to recover? Recovering would never be possible without a political solution. So war should stop, knowing that, unfortunately, Israel is increasing their attacks not only on the Gaza Strip, but also in the West Bank. And also they are involved in any other wars in Syria and South Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, options to move forward with the help of the international community. Many world leaders have proposed different paths, specifically for Gaza's future.
Yes.
The Arab League, led by Egypt, has backed a resolution under the Palestinian Authority, while U.S. President rather, Donald Trump suggests that the U.S. take over Gaza to make it the Riviera of the Middle East. What are your thoughts on these two proposals?
Well, to be honest, this proposal by President Trump is more than absurd. It is absurd and it's illegal. It is really very surprising to have a leader of a superpower, a major player on the international scene, presenting such a plan which is against the international law and proposing to move displacement of the population of Gaza. It is a kind of ethnic cleansing. And I don't know whether he consulted legal advisors around him before suggesting such absurdity. This is one thing. The rejection came not only from the Arab world, but from the international community as a whole. You talked about the reconstruction plan by the Arab League.
Yeah.
The Arab League proposed a reconstruction plan with a budget of $53 billion. And with having the population on the ground, without moving the population, and under the overall authority of the Palestinian National Authority, which means the government of the state of Palestine, who will ensure the security there. The plan was welcomed by many countries, and fortunately it was welcomed by major players in Europe, just like those who are close to Israel as well.
But do you back it, Ambassador?
Sorry?
Do you back it? Do you back it, Ambassador?
Of course, our president was present at the Arab League, and it was submitted in consultation with our government, actually. So it was also supported by Germany, UK, France, and Italy, those who are close to Israel, and their support to this plan, it's a kind of a rejection to the Trump proposal.
Of course.
So I think the proposal of President Trump will never be accepted, and it will never be implemented as well. Now, for the implementation of the reconstruction plan of the Arab League, the problem will be how to manage having this huge budget, which is 53 billion, but there will be an international conference in Cairo in few days, actually beginning of April, if I'm not mistaken.
To fine-tune more details of this plan.
So
but there's direction.
It is the right direction, and the plan consists by having a kind of a technocrat committee for the first 6 months for the reconstruction, and well, before the reconstruction they need to remove all the rubble as well, and it will take time. But for the security in Gaza, it will be under the authority of the Palestinian government. We have already our civil servants in Gaza, and there will be also some, training by the Egyptian police and some other Arab countries.
Okay. It's definitely something to look forward to. In the meantime, we're going to be taking a quick break. Trade Talks, Economy in Focus will be right back. Welcome back to Trade Talks, Economy in Focus, where we continue our discussion with His Excellency, Ambassador Munir Anastas of Palestine to the Philippines. Ambassador Anastas, in this segment, let's talk about the bilateral relations between the Philippines and Palestine. It's a modest one. No commercial relations and because we lack trade agreements, right? How would you describe that relationship today?
It is principally a political relation between Philippines and Palestine. Philippines has long been in support of international law and international humanitarian law. And that's why Philippines is supporting the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. So when it comes to resolutions in the UN, we can notice that Philippines votes always in favor of these rights. For example, the right to the self-determination. The Philippines always vote in favor of this resolution. Recently, there were some resolutions regarding, remember, we have an issue with the UNRWA that Israel has forbidden to practice and to exist, to stay in Jerusalem and in the Palestinian territory. So there was a resolution at the UN, and Philippines voted in favor of this resolution as well. There were many resolutions as well regarding the conflict in Gaza and in favor of the ceasefire. Same thing, Philippines voted in favor of this resolution. So the relations up till now are principally political relations, and the support is mutual, because Palestine also became member since 2011 in UNESCO, full member.
Yeah.
So we have also a vote, and whenever Philippines was in need of support, Palestine was always supporting. And same thing in the other agencies where we became members. So for the moment, it is purely political relations and mutual
as you rebuild,
support.
hopefully we build on that.
We are building on that, and we are in talks now currently with the DFA in order to prepare for memorandum of understanding in different fields, trade, tourism as well, culture and education.
In preparation
for
for
example,
better times,
education in Philippines, especially the TVET, is very advanced, and in Palestine we are in need of this field. So we are preparing for the signature of such agreements. Now for the trade and commerce, it is a little bit more complex. You know, the distance is so far.
Yes, the physical distance is a barrier in itself.
It is a barrier.
And of course, you're in survival mode now. Can you give us an idea, Ambassador Anastas, about the Philippine population in Israel, in Gaza and in the West Bank? How was it prior to the October 7th
Well, you mean
attack?
in Palestine, not in Israel.
Sorry, yes, Palestine, yes, in Palestine.
Well, prior to the conflict, during a long period, we had a small Filipino community in the West Bank and in Gaza. But unfortunately, in the West Bank, Israel has forbidden any Filipino to stay there. So those who were for them was possible to stay, it was only the religious missions, and the workers who were there were not able to stay. So only in Gaza the workers were able to stay, and they were mixed to the Palestinian population actually, and that's why we have some refugees who came back to Philippines. They are mixed couples. Filipinos, Palestinians. So but it is a very small community. We're talking about a few hundreds, not more. And they left the Gaza Strip, all of them, they left since the breakout of this war. So in the West Bank, unfortunately, as I told you, since more than 15 years or something like that, Israel forbid them to stay there.
So no Filipinos.
Yeah. There is a community in Israel, not in Palestine nowadays. Yes.
Okay, as you look to rebuild, when the situation cools, when peace is restored, what sort of assistance can the Philippines, in terms of the economy and manpower, what sort of assistance can we provide Palestine?
Well, there are many fields in which Philippines can help Palestine. But let me first thank Philippines and the civil defense in Philippines, who provided a great help to our population in Gaza. They sent, I don't know the exact quantity, but many material for the civil defense, gloves and things like that. It has been sent last month. And there is an intention to continue supporting in this regard. But this is the current support, this is the urgent, let's say, humanitarian support. But for the future, as I mentioned, Philippines has experience in different domains in which we can also benefit. I mentioned education, for example. This could be one field. in culture as well. You know, here in Philippines, you have many festivals and you have many activities, cultural activities. In this field as well, we can have mutual, let's say, mutual programs and yeah. So there are many fields. For trade and commerce, we are trying to make something. As I mentioned before to you, one of the products, important products from Palestine that we export very well, it's the olive oil.
Right.
And here in Philippines, you need it, but you already import from Spain and from Italy and from Morocco. So we will see with the experts what would be the possibility to export such
I'm sure
products.
there are different characteristics to Palestinian olive oil.
Of course,
the terroir is very different, and
it comes from the Holy Land already.
Yes, of course,
it's something
of course. That's already a plus point for Filipinos. You know, looking at the bigger picture, we're just down to our last couple of minutes. What is the biggest obstacle to lasting peace in the region today?
Well, the most simple thing to say, actually, and it's not only Palestine or the Arab world who says it, it is even Israelis and the Western countries. To have lasting peace, just and lasting peace, there is only one way. It is the implementation of the two-state solution. But unfortunately, many countries who pretend that they are in favor of the two-state solution, I'm talking about Western countries just like Germany, France, Italy, UK, and others, they continue to say always that they are in favor of the two-state solution and it is the only way to reach peace and stability in the region. But meanwhile, they recognize only one state over the two. Which is not the case in Philippines. Philippines recognizes the two states already since a while. And there are 149 countries around the world who recognize the state of Palestine. So, first step, the countries who do not recognize Palestine, they should start by recognizing Palestine. This is the first step. Second step, there should be a pressure by the international community on Israel for the implementation of the two-state solution. This is the only way to guarantee peace, stability, and security for everybody in the region. No other way is possible.
Right.
And even you can see the former Shin Bet director, Ami Ayalon, who said it to Amanpour in CNN, in an interview with CNN. He said the only way to guarantee the security of Israel is the end of the Israeli occupation and the implementation of the two-state solution.
Okay, on another front, Ambassador Anastas, Palestinians have shown incredible resiliency in the face of these enormous challenges. What can the world learn? What can Filipinos learn about Palestinian perseverance?
Well, this resilience, let me tell you something about the resilience of our population. During the war and under the bombardment in Gaza, young filmmakers, girls and boys, they managed to produce 22 short films. And I will be circulating these short films in Manila soon. These short films shows the reality, their reality, and it shows also the resilience of these artists, let's say. Same thing, there are other artists, painters and sculptors who continued producing art under the bombardment.
And it's things like this that give you hope for the future of Palestine.
Yeah, this is one thing. The second thing, it is the support that we have from the international community. You can watch the demonstrations, the continuous demonstrations in the US principally, in the UK, in Canada and in other countries in Europe in favor of the Palestinian rights and against the continuous attacks of Israel, in favor of the ceasefire and the respect of the ceasefire. But unfortunately, President Trump, now he wants to, how to say, to stop the freedom of speech in the US. They arrested some activists in Columbian University and other universities, and he's threatening these universities if they don't forbid these demonstrations, they will stop funding. Yeah.
Well, he's rocking the boat in a lot of aspects.
You know, this is a blunt attack against freedom of expression, and this is unusual for the U.S.
Yeah. Okay, unfortunately, Ambassador Anastas, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for sharing your insights with us on the situation in Palestine and more.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and that's it for today's show. I'm Maiki Oreta. Stay up to date on the latest in business and the economy right here on Trade Talks. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo news channel.
Up next.